welcome back to another video. Um, so a couple of things before we get into this. You're probably gonna hear my not my campfire, but my fireplace. I just put some new wood in to it, so you're probably gonna hear it do its thing, and it's gonna crackle in the background. I'm gonna try not to let it get too loud. So I'll probably turn down my mic volume a little bit. And then you might hear my dog, because my dog is always wanting no matter what. So, then also, um, a little bit of a background on why I didn't make this video when episode 3 came out. That's because, and I'll get to this in a little bit, but there's really not a whole lot to say about episode 3 of season 15. So I just thought maybe I would just compile the two, and by the time that I had time to record, like voice record, I just it was pointless. Um, so now let's get on to the video. So today I want to talk about episode 3 and episode 4. Now, we'll start out with episode 3 because there really isn't a whole lot to talk about, like I just said. So the thing that I want to talk about is that I really didn't like that episode. And I'm going to be honest with you, it wasn't horrible. It just, after coming off at the high of the premiere, you would realize that there really isn't there isn't really like a good story here. You know what I'm saying? Because the premiere had the Everett Lynch case, and that was a cliffhanger, and I'll explain why I'm upset with how that sort of ended right there, because I feel like in previous seasons they did a better job of having like an overarching story, and so that lasted throughout the whole season, and it was talked about tremendously. So episode 3 was just sort of like, it was an okay episode. I have never really been a big fan of the bombing episodes because they're just bombings, nothing really interesting, and the effects that they used for this episode was just horrible, as per usual. Horrible. I mean, not as per usual, but for bombings, it was just kind of unrealistic. And I mean, but I will say that if I could if there was one episode this season so far that you could eat for, it's gonna be this episode, and oh, sorry, episode 3 and episode 4 are really good. If you want to eat food while you're watching Criminal Minds this season, these 2 episodes have been really good to to your stomach. So go ahead, watch them. I mean, I ate a salad during the premiere, and but Criminal Minds has ruined corn for me. Just saying. So, all right, but that's besides the point. So there's a couple things that I want to bring up, and that's because I really didn't care for the case, and then I also really didn't care for Matt and his family. Those scenes, really could care less about that. Don't give it a crap, really. And then I also wanted to talk about the fact that they did a cognitive in that episode. They did a cognitive, and it was really, 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 really bad, because normally, you're able to you're able to see what's going through these people's heads, and the audience feels like they're being fully immersed when they had the cognitives, and they used to do them all the time, and it was very confusing because they don't do that anymore, and they also really don't deliver the profile that much anymore either, which is confusing because don't you think that that's kind of like the big part of the show? And I understand that there is sort of like a reasoning behind that, and that's because they want to make these recent seasons like more realistic. So they added less of Garcia into the show, and um, they added some more realism into it. But it's a TV show. It really is. I mean, I completely respect the actual BAU, and I respect the FBI, and I've respect for everybody who works in those fields, and because they have a very tough time. Like they have to look at the crime scene photos, and that can't be easy. So complete and utter respect for those people. Um, and so yeah, and so I really wish they would have like went fully into the cognitive, and it just felt like they were rushing it, and that's and I'll get to that in a little bit, and on how they're kind of rushing things at this point. Um, so now that's episode 3. That's all I had to say about episode 3. Meh. And I would give it like probably like a 6.5 out of 10. Because it wasn't horrible, it just wasn't really my cup of tea. I would have preferred to get more backstory on Everett Lynch, and like to get like to see like and they don't mention Everett in this episode or in episode 4. So I'm like, okay, well, are they still working on the case? Like what? So now on to episode 4, and this is, I think, my favorite so far of this season. It was hilarious. It was the best, and um, I really liked the fact that Garcia got like a lot of screen time this episode, because she normally just gets maybe like 2 or 3 um, scenes throughout the show, and so it's good to see that she's getting more attention, and I kind of wish that they would kind of stick with that, because she's been around since the very beginning, and so it feels like they've just been discarding her. But when it's a full Garcia centric episode, you know that you already get a win from me. Um, there's a couple of things I want to talk about here as well. A lot more than episode 3, but there's just a few. Um, so let's start with the promo, because a lot of people said, "Oh my God, if you touch Garcia, blah 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 blah," um, the episode doesn't really. Well, let's just say the promo is just very clickbaity in a way, like it's just like it's clickbait. Um, they are trying to reel in their viewers and stuff, and it's just like what on earth. And I know that I haven't really talked about the promos. I don't think I've talked about them. But it's worth mentioning that their promos are actually getting shorter and shorter. But um so Garcia is actually helping out one of her friends, and because there's a stalker case. I'm not gonna spoil it. I spoiled a lot of the premiere, so I'm not gonna spoil that much for these 2 episodes. But all I'll tell you is that um, it's a really fun episode. Not a big fan of Max. Really not a big fan, and that's because I just I I don't think Reed needs like to be like Reed doesn't need a partner. Like he's always sort of been like a solo act, and I kind of prefer that over him having a family. I mean, I'm not saying that he shouldn't in the future, but I just didn't really like how Max just waltzed in, and but I did like the magic scene that happened, which was actually really cool. So good on Reed. And I like that there was an autistic. I think he was autistic, an autistic boy. That was I could definitely like relate to that kid. Because I do have autism, so I could definitely relate to him if that's what he has. And I thought that was interesting just to see, because like we never really get to see those types of people on this show. Like we always see them in a bad light. Like they're always like the killers. So it was really good to see like a character that had like a mental health disorder, but you know, that wasn't evil. Like was just like a kid. So I think that was really nice. I'm not liking this whole forced love thing between Reed and Max though, because, and I mean, I guess you could say it did like it. Spencer, oh, sorry, Reed is it feels like a natural to this. He there's just something about those scenes that it felt really natural. It really did. But also like it's the final season and he literally just met a random person. And I guess like, like of course you're always meeting random people, but it just for them to instantly have a connection like that is kind of weird. I mean, I guess it's not impossible because like I instantly fell in love with the Foxvillians, so it's not completely impossible, but I just felt that it was just kind of weird. Um, you know, and then you know, I I, I want to talk about Maeve because whenever I saw Max, I just thought back to how like Maeve was introduced, and I prefer how Maeve was introduced compared to how Max was, because Maeve had this mysteriousness to her, and I think that was like the best part of her being on the show was that she was just mysterious, and unfortunately, things happened, and but so I think that was just unfortunate though because they really had chemistry. And Reed and Max just they don't have it. They really don't, and I don't blame them. They literally just met each other, but they just don't really, they just don't really have any chemistry. And it was just like, come on, like the writing was really good this episode, like amazing, and like they didn't like they didn't you know at least talk about Maeve, or they didn't even think about like how Maeve was introduced. Like they they didn't even think about like having um Max be introduced in a more interesting way, in a more interesting light. uh I was just kind of confused with that. And then there's another thing that I want to talk about, and that's the fact that this episode, like I said, it's really funny, and I love Garcia because she's really funny this episode. When she was saying "wheels up," and then like Luke was like, "We're not going anywhere," and she's all like, she's she's just like, just because you could do this with your mouth doesn't mean you have to, like. It was really funny, and I laughed really hard at that, and because it was just those subtle moments that were just happy. And so this episode I felt definitely was a little all over the place. It tried to cover every single base, like every single character, and that's when you start to realize that there may be a little bit too many characters into the show. But it's not a bad thing. It really isn't. But it just kind of felt everywhere. But it did a really good job with keeping whatever type of tension there was. Um, and the case was sort of interesting. Um, you know, and the uh, the thing um, that I want to tell you is that there are other parts to this episode, of course. Like there's a part where Prentice is gets in a little bit of trouble with one of her old neighbors, and they brought up the fact that she died and came back, which is a spoiler, but you probably have already, like, if you've gotten to here, you probably have seen that. So, um, and so that was like that's oh my god, those scenes were hilarious as per usual. Yeah, very very funny. And then there was this whole gag with the red crib. Red isn't a bad color. It isn't. I don't know why they were acting like it was such a horrible color. It just, and again, like I think Joe saved those scenes a lot because I realized when Matt and Christy were alone in those episodes. Well, not in those episodes, in that episode, uh, last week. I realized that they just didn't really have, like it was just meh, you know. Um, and so I preferred, Joe being there because, aka Dave Rossi, of course, because Rossi just kind of like has that flow to him, you know, and yeah, it was just interesting. Um, and there's really not anything else to talk about. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, thank you, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.